You never forget the first wound, not the kind that bleeds, the kind that teaches you what the word cruelty really means. You remember the moment, the room, the silence after their betrayal. It wasn't the sound that hurt. It was the echo of your own heart breaking inside your chest, realizing kindness was never a shield. It was bait. You gave your light to people who only wanted warmth long enough to burn you with it. You opened your hands, and they filled them with knives. You trusted, and they called it weakness. You forgave, and they called it foolishness. You loved, and they called it leverage. That's when you learned. Pain doesn't end. It evolves. It finds new ways to breathe inside you. It stops screaming and starts whispering. It seeps into your bones until even your silence hurts. You tried to run from it. You tried to heal. You tried to tell yourself that time would fix it. But time didn't fix anything. It only taught you how to hide the wound behind a straight face. You walked through days pretending to be okay, smiling in public, dying in private. Every laugh was hollow, every breath heavy. You became your own ghost, haunting the life you once loved. And one night, you realized something. You weren't healing. You were hardening. The weight on your chest wasn't sadness anymore. It was stone. Every betrayal, every lie, every goodbye, pressing down, shaping you, sculpting you. Until your heart didn't break, it fossilized. People think heartbreak destroys you. No, it forges you into something they can no longer reach. They think they shattered you, but they were only chiseling away what was weak. Every scar turned into marble. Every tear carved another line in the statue you were becoming. And for the first time, you didn't feel fragile. You felt ancient. You felt indestructible. That's the cruel beauty of pain. It doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it transforms. It takes the softness that once begged to be loved and turns it into silence that demands respect. You stopped asking, "Why me?" You started saying, "Watch me," because what was once broken now stood unmovable, cold, still, eternal. They thought you were falling apart, but the truth is, you were solidifying, becoming something permanent in a world of temporary people. They say love makes you human, but pain makes you stone, and stone never bleeds. It never begs. It never bends. You see, when the world tried to crush you, it only compacted you. When they walked away, you learned how to stand alone. When they spoke lies, you found peace in silence. When they turned cold, you turned colder. Not out of hate, but out of survival. You started to see the pattern. Every disappointment was a layer. Every betrayal was a brick. Every heartbreak was another sculptor's strike. And while they thought they were breaking you, they were building you. You became the monument to everything you endured, a shrine to resilience, an altar of scars that no longer bleed. But there's something haunting about transformation. Because when you turn to stone, you stop feeling the fire that once made you alive. You stop recognizing the person in the mirror because the softness is gone. And in its place stands something colder, something quieter, something dangerous. They call it numbness. You call it peace, because peace, after all that pain, feels like death to those who've never suffered. They'll never understand how silence can be louder than screams, how stillness can hold more power than rage. You became the storm that forgot how to move, a god frozen mid-roar, unbothered, unbreakable, unmoved. And though you stand alone now, there's power in that solitude. Because no one can touch what no longer feels. No one can wound what no longer bleeds. No one can destroy what has already turned to stone. So let them talk. Let them mock. Let them wonder why your eyes no longer light up the way they used to. They'll never understand that light costs blood, and you've paid enough. The first wound made you question your worth. The last one made you eternal. You didn't just survive the pain, you became it. You wear it like armor now, carved into your soul, heavy but holy. This is the birth of the stone. The moment you stop trying to be understood and start becoming unforgettable. They thought they buried a broken man, but they only laid the foundation for a monument. Every scar has a sound. You can't hear it unless you've bled long enough to recognize the frequency. It's the hum behind your silence, the faint ringing that never goes away. It begins the moment betrayal finds your name, the sound of trust cracking, that soft, sacred sound, the sigh you exhale before you break, the silence after a door closes that you never expected to close. That's the sound of a soul being carved into shape, not with beauty, but with pain. You remember their faces, the ones who smiled while cutting you open, the ones who said, "I'd never hurt you," and then did, not out of hate, but out of indifference. That's what makes betrayal so poisonous. It's not rage, it's apathy. They didn't even care enough to destroy you on purpose. You gave everything you had, loyalty, time, love, patience, and they left you like it was nothing. And that nothing became everything to you. You replayed it in your head 1,000 times. What could I have done different? What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? The truth came slow, like a knife being turned. You weren't the problem. They were never capable of depth. You were a storm. They were puddles, and puddles fear depth. You stayed loyal to people who were loyal only to their convenience. You carried souls that were never meant to walk beside you, and when they left, it felt like your lungs forgot how to breathe. You learned that some goodbyes don't come with closure. They come with echoes, with unanswered questions, with nights staring at the ceiling, fighting your own heartbeat because it still whispers their name. That's when pain turns into a habit. You stop expecting comfort. You stop hoping for rescue. You learn to live in the burn, to build a home in the hurt. And in that quiet agony, something starts shifting inside you. You stop breaking and start building. Brick by brick, scar by scar, silence by silence. Each scar tells a story, but only you can hear it. Because the world sees you smile again, but it doesn't hear the silence behind it. They see your eyes, but not the weight behind your stare. They see your strength, but not the wars you fought to become it. The pain didn't kill you. It refined you. It burned away the softness that used to beg for understanding. It left behind something pure, something terrifying, something permanent. You realized pain wasn't punishment. It was purification. It cleansed you of illusions. It stripped you down to truth. It showed you who you were when no one was watching. The same hands that betrayed you also built your backbone. The same people who mocked your silence taught you the language of endurance. You owe your strength to their weakness. You owe your focus to their absence. You owe your rise to their fall. Because the moment you stopped chasing them, you started finding yourself. And the sound of that quiet, defiant, beating heart inside the wreckage, became music. You started moving differently, talking less, feeling sharper. Your presence became heavy, like thunder waiting to break. They noticed. The ones who hurt you could feel it. That shift, that silence, that unbothered energy that says, "You can't reach me anymore." They wondered how you survived. They expected ruins, but saw a resurrection. They expected a ghost, but met a God, because you learned the secret. Pain is a mirror. It shows you who you are when everything else is stripped away. And when you stare into it long enough, you stop fearing reflection. You start respecting it. The sound of your scars became your anthem. Every heartbreak became percussion. Every betrayal became melody. And the rhythm of your survival became divine. You stopped looking back, not because you forgot, but because stone doesn't chase shadows. You stopped explaining your silence, because the world isn't meant to understand a language carved in pain. Now, you walk through chaos like it's home. You look betrayal in the eye and feel nothing, because once you've been burned alive, a little heat means nothing. They broke you to see if you'd crawl. You stood to show them what unbreakable looks like. They tried to silence you, but your silence became scripture. That's what they'll never understand. Every scar sings, every wound whispers, every silence speaks. And every time they hurt you, the song got louder, the anthem got stronger, the statue grew taller. You became something they can't unmake, because you didn't just heal, you hardened. They left me in pieces, but every scar learned how to sing. Now, the silence they gave me echoes louder than their names. There comes a moment after the storm, after the screaming, after you've drowned in your own thoughts one too many times, when everything just goes quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but that kind of silence that feels like the air forgot how to move. It's not comfort. It's not calm. It's emptiness, wearing the mask of peace. That's when pain learns to breathe. You stop crying, not because you're okay, but because there's nothing left to cry out. The tears run dry. The heart stops reacting, and what used to hurt now just echoes. You sit in the dark, not to hide, but to listen. You start hearing things differently. The hum of your own heartbeat, the whisper of your own breath, the sound of your soul trying to rebuild itself from ashes. That silence becomes sacred, because it's the only thing that doesn't lie to you. People did, promises did, but silence never pretended to care. It just existed. Cold, honest, unforgiving. You start to realize something. Not everyone deserves to know your story. Not every pain needs to be spoken, because when you start talking about it, they listen for drama, not for healing. They don't want your truth. They want your weakness. So you stop explaining. You stop proving. You stop reaching out to hands that always let go first. You stop trying to make broken souls understand your blueprint, and you find something strange inside that quiet. Strength. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that sits still while everything burns and doesn't flinch, the kind that doesn't need to win the argument. It just walks away and lets silence speak the verdict. They used to mistake your quiet for surrender. They thought your calm meant defeat, but they didn't know silence can cut sharper than words ever could. You learned that you don't have to announce your growth. You don't have to scream your comeback. You don't need applause when your peace is the loudest sound in the room, because silence is where pain gets reborn as power. Every night you spent fighting your thoughts, that was your training. Every moment you bit your tongue instead of responding, that was your discipline. Every time you held back tears and replaced them with breath, that was your evolution. You weren't ignoring the pain. You were teaching it to breathe differently. You were sculpting it into patience, forging it into awareness, turning it into something that no longer controlled you, but answered to you. You started to see beauty in detachment. You realized the less you react, the more you command, because chaos feeds on reaction, and silence starves it. You became unreadable, not because you're empty, but because you're full of things the world doesn't deserve to understand. You found home in solitude. You learned that isolation isn't loneliness. It's clarity, that being alone doesn't mean you're abandoned. It means you're undisturbed, and that's where the real power lives. You stop chasing closure. You stop searching for apologies, because the truth is, none of them could fix what they broke. And you finally accepted that healing isn't about getting answers. It's about finding peace in the unanswered. That's when the transformation deepens, when the noise of the world fades, and your own silence becomes symphonic. You begin to hear things you've never heard before. Your own willpower breathing, your soul whispering, "We're still here." You start walking lighter, talking slower, feeling less, but knowing more. And that stillness becomes your throne, because silence is not emptiness. It's containment. It's the kingdom built from restraint. It's the crown earned by self-control. It's the proof that the loudest power is the one that no longer needs to speak. You don't respond to disrespect. You don't chase what walks away. You don't fight battles beneath your level. Because when you've seen pain this deep, pettiness feels like dust. You stand taller now, not because you've healed completely, but because you've stopped falling for noise. That's the gift of silence. It turns your chaos into command, your pain into presence, your scars into scripture. Now, when they try to provoke you, you just stare, cold, calm. They don't realize your silence isn't weakness. It's warning. You've become the storm they can't hear coming, because it moves without sound and strikes without warning. You've learned what few ever do, that silence isn't absence, it's ascension. In my silence, I found something louder than pain, power that breathes without needing to speak. There was no thunder when it happened, no explosion, just a quiet click inside my chest, like a lock turning for the last time. That was the day I stopped feeling, not out of choice, out of exhaustion, because when you've felt everything, you start craving nothing. I remember waking up one morning, looking at the same sky, breathing the same air, and realizing I didn't care anymore. Not about apologies, not about explanations, not about them. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity, the kind that comes after drowning, when you finally stop fighting the water and let yourself sink, only to realize the bottom isn't as deep as they made it seem. You reach it, you stand up, and suddenly you can breathe again. That's when I understood. Feelings were the chains that kept me human, and being human was my biggest weakness, because the same empathy that made me loyal made me easy to wound. The same heart that made me kind made me vulnerable to monsters wearing smiles. So I let the fire die. I stopped letting every heartbreak write its story in my blood. I stopped letting memories dictate my worth. I stopped chasing closure from people, allergic to accountability. You learn fast. The ones who break you never intend to fix you. They feed on reaction. They thrive on your emotion. They enjoy knowing they still control your heartbeat. So I took that away from them. My emotion, my reaction, my heartbeat, all of it. They could talk, lie, disappear, but nothing inside me moved anymore. It wasn't sadness. It was stillness, a dangerous kind, because there's nothing more terrifying than a soul that no longer needs validation. Nothing more powerful than a man who feels nothing, where pain used to live. The day I stopped feeling, I stopped bleeding. And when you stop bleeding, you stop feeding their power. I realized empathy is a weapon, one that I'd been turning against myself for years, caring for those who never cared, saving those who watched me drown, loving those who only loved my light, never my shadows. So I stopped being their source of warmth. I let the fire freeze, and in that freeze, I found form. People started calling me cold. They said I'd changed. They said I was heartless. And maybe they were right, because the version of me they could hurt no longer exists. The boy who forgave too fast, dead. The friend who gave too much, buried. The man who begged to be understood, gone. In his place stands something quieter, heavier, harder. I don't react anymore. I calculate. I don't love blindly. I observe. I don't trust easily. I watch. That's the evolution they never see coming. They think you've fallen into darkness, but really, you've stepped into control. You've learned the rarest form of power, emotional detachment. Now their chaos doesn't reach you. Their words don't pierce. Their opinions don't matter. You've become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you burned the blueprint to your soul. You no longer let everyone in. You no longer need to, because the more you felt, the more they fed. And the day you stopped feeling, you stopped feeding the beast. That's when life changes, because once you lose sensitivity to pain, you gain sensitivity to purpose. You start seeing the world as it is, raw, ruthless, real. And instead of breaking from it, you begin building with it. You become stone in motion, a storm with patience, a blade with memory. And people feel it when you walk in. The silence, the composure, the lack of emotional chaos. They call it arrogance, but it's just peace that no longer needs to explain itself. You stopped looking for love. You started embodying power. You stopped asking, why me? You started whispering, try me. Because when you've already felt the worst, there's nothing left to fear. You could lose everything tomorrow and still sleep peacefully tonight, because you've already lost what mattered most. And somehow, you survived. And now that you know you can survive that, nothing can break you again. You're not numb. You're evolved. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not unfeeling. You're unshakable. That's what they'll never understand. They think feeling nothing means you're empty. But in truth, it means you've become complete. Because the parts of you that begged for love are gone. The parts that depended on others, erased. All that remains is what can't be destroyed. The day I stopped feeling, I stopped needing. And the moment I stopped needing, I became free. The day I stopped feeling wasn't the day I died. It was the day they tried to break me. They did, with lies, with silence, with absence. They threw everything they had, and still, here I stand. Because you can't destroy what refuses to move. You can't wound what's already scarred. You can't kill what's already died and risen again in silence. This is what happens when pain hardens into discipline, when the heart stops chasing healing and starts building thrones, when every weakness is burned off in the fire of repetition, focus, and solitude. They wanted to see me fall, but I didn't fall. I rooted. They thought they buried me, They didn't know I was stone. I learned something in that stillness. Strength doesn't shout. Power doesn't announce itself. Real power just stands there, unmoved, unimpressed, unbreakable. You become like the mountains, silent, ancient, patient. You don't chase storms. You wait for them to pass, and when they do, you're still there. That's what it means to be the stone that stood. While they crumble under the weight of their own noise, you remain, steady, watching, eternal. The world will try to test you again. New faces, same betrayals. New voices, same poison. But when you've turned to stone, you no longer flinch. You just watch them break themselves against your calm. That's the beauty of becoming untouchable. Not because you hide from the world, but because the world no longer dictates who you are. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop playing the games that once consumed you. You become what they can't understand, a force of control in a world addicted to chaos. Now, when people raise their voices, you lower yours. When they attack, you remain still, because silence has gravity. And the calm of a man who's been through hell makes the loudest tremble. You've reached the level where peace isn't an option, it's armor. Where solitude isn't punishment, it's privilege. Where pain isn't memory, it's muscle. You no longer seek validation. You've buried that need under the rubble of who you used to be. You no longer chase understanding, because understanding doesn't build empires. Discipline does. You wake up and move like a machine, forged from emotion. You train not to escape the past, but to become the consequence of it. You lift not to prove something, but because weight is the only thing that speaks your language. You run, you grind, you endure, because pain taught you rhythm, and silence taught you control. You start seeing your reflection differently, not as someone broken, but as someone carved. Every vein, every scar, every quiet breath, proof that you didn't just survive, you became. They whisper, he changed. No, I returned. Returned to the version of me that existed before the world told me to soften, before kindness was weaponized, before loyalty was punished. Now, I don't bend, I don't beg, I don't bleed for those who enjoy watching me ache. I simply stand, because a man who stands still after the storm is no longer just a man. He's a monument. They'll try again, they always do, but I've seen this pattern enough times to smile through it. The betrayals, the losses, the fake apologies, they don't surprise me anymore. Predictability killed my pain. Now, instead of anger, I feel distance. Instead of heartbreak, I feel understanding. Instead of hatred, I feel nothing. And that nothing is my weapon. Because nothing is heavier than a calm man who has nothing left to lose. And you start to realize being cold isn't cruel. It's consistent. It's the temperature of survival. Now, people don't hurt you. They expose themselves. Their betrayals aren't daggers anymore. They're mirrors. Every attack reveals what they fear about you. Every insult reveals what they lack within themselves. You learn to love the silence that follows your strength, because it's not emptiness. It's power holding its breath. It's the space between your patience and your vengeance. They wanted a reaction. They got reflection. They wanted war. They found stone. And that's when they start to fear you, because they realize you don't crumble. You endure. You wait. You watch. And when you finally move, it's not for noise. It's for legacy. You've mastered the art of endurance, the elegance of restraint, the silence of domination. That's the final stage of strength, when even your stillness commands commands respect. And now you understand. You were never meant to be soft. You were meant to be solid. You were never made to blend in. You were made to outlast. When you reach that level of being, the world can throw its worst storms at you, and all it does is polish the surface. The cracks don't weaken you. They define you. You're not the same. You're stronger, colder, wiser, and infinitely harder to break, because pain gave you what comfort never could: structure. You became the stone that stood. And when the world asks why you're so silent now, you simply whisper, "I'm not silent, I'm standing." They thought the silence meant defeat, but it was the sound of the stone still standing long after the storm was gone. Learned how to live without chains. They always come back, not because they care, but because curiosity burns louder than guilt. They want to see if you survived, if the damage still shows, if the pain they caused still echoes in your eyes. But when they look at you now, they don't see the same soul they left bleeding. They see stone. They see silence. They see everything they tried to destroy, standing tall, unmoved, unshaken. And for the first time, they feel small, because the same fire they thought would consume you now burns behind your calm. The same silence they mocked now terrifies them. The same heart they broke now beats with the rhythm of discipline, not emotion. They stare at you, waiting for the old version to speak, the one that used to beg for closure, the one that used to chase validation. But that person is gone, buried beneath the ruins of betrayal. In his place stands a monument, forged in pain, fueled by silence, crowned by endurance. You don't need to speak anymore. Your existence is the loudest revenge, because there's a certain terror in watching someone you once broke smile again, not out of happiness, but out of awareness. A smile that says, "I remember everything, and I still won." They wanted you shattered, scattered, lost. Instead, you built empires out of the rubble. You built peace from the war they started. You turned every insult into instruction, every scar into scripture. And now, your silence makes them nervous. Your composure becomes their mirror, because deep down, they know you didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. You became something they can't reach anymore, something their guilt can't touch, their apologies can't fix, and their memory can't haunt. They thought time would heal them and humble you, but time didn't heal them. It exposed them, and it didn't humble you. It hardened you. Now, when they see you, they remember what they lost, not the version they hurt, but the version that became untouchable because of that hurt. You don't look back with anger anymore. You look back with understanding, because you know now they were never enemies. They were sculptors. They carved you out of chaos. They chipped away your weakness until all that remained was raw strength. They were the reason you met the version of yourself that doesn't break, the one that doesn't beg, the one that doesn't flinch when the world turns cold. And that's the cruel irony. They made you unbreakable, trying to break you. Now, their guilt follows them like a shadow that never leaves, because nothing haunts a betrayer more than seeing the one they wounded rise higher without them. Nothing silences a liar like the success of the person they lied about. Nothing destroys the arrogant like realizing the one they looked down on now looks down at them. You didn't take revenge, you became it. You didn't shout, you simply rose. And the higher you rose, the smaller they became. Now their words can't reach you. Their games can't touch you. Their gossip dies in your silence. You've learned that silence is the sharpest blade. It cuts through illusion. It splits ego. It forces people to hear their own noise. You never needed to get even. You just needed to get free. And that freedom is louder than any revenge could ever be. They expected you to hate them, but hate would have made them important again. You didn't hate. You forgot. That's the true punishment. Indifference. When their name no longer triggers pain. When their memory no longer stings. When they realize they don't exist in your story anymore. You've moved on, but not forward. Upward. You've ascended past pettiness, past resentment, past every low frequency they tried to keep you trapped in. They wanted control. You gave them silence. And silence is the one thing they can't manipulate. Now your calm is their chaos. Your distance is their defeat. Your peace is their punishment. Because peace isn't weakness. It's proof that the war is over and you won. Look at them now, still talking, still explaining, still performing, while you just exist, still, unshaken, whole. That's power. That's evolution. That's the kind of victory no applause can match. The victory of becoming untouchable. They thought they'd leave you empty, but emptiness became your empire. They thought they'd silence you, but silence became your throne. They thought they'd erase you, but your name now echoes in the halls of resilience. You no longer walk to prove them wrong. You walk to prove yourself right, because every step is a reminder. I made it out of something that was supposed to end me, and that truth alone is power enough to crush every ghost of the past. So now when they see you, calm, grounded, unbothered, they see what they created, and they hate it, because they can't break what they built. You became their consequence, their living reminder that cruelty backfires, that silence outlasts noise, that stone doesn't fall, it waits. You didn't just endure them, you outlasted their world, and now they finally understand. You can't destroy someone who found peace in pain. You can't break someone who made the ruins his kingdom. You can't win against someone who doesn't play the game anymore. They came to see if I was broken and left realizing I'd become the monument built from their failure. They thought the story ended when you turned to stone. They thought silence meant stillness. They thought immovable meant lifeless. But one night, the air shifted, and the statue moved. That's the part they never expected. That the monument they built through betrayal would breathe. That the soul they tried to bury beneath weight would awaken. That the man they turned to stone would open his eyes and remember everything. Because you never truly died in the dark. You were meditating in the ruins. You were rebirthing, becoming something they didn't have a word for. They wanted to break your body. Instead, they reforged your spirit. They wanted silence to swallow you. Instead, you learned to speak through silence. And when you moved again, the world trembled. Not because you shouted, but because your calm now carried gravity. Every step echoed like prophecy. Every word struck like thunder behind glass. You became the embodiment of what they fear most. Stillness with power. A soul that doesn't react, doesn't flinch, doesn't kneel. A presence that makes noise question its purpose. You became the statue that moved, a symbol of what it means to evolve beyond pain. Because when you've endured long enough, you start glowing in the dark instead of drowning in it. They used to look down on you. Now they look up, because every man who stands after being broken becomes a living myth, the proof that the spirit can't be shattered, only shaped. Your silence became sacred. Your pain became prophecy. Your scars became scripture. And every lesson carved into your soul now gleams under the light of your composure. They can't read you anymore. They don't understand how you can be so calm after so much chaos. But calm isn't what's left. It's what's earned. Calm is the language of those who've already survived their own destruction. That's what they don't grasp. You didn't lose emotion. You mastered it. You didn't run from pain. You absorbed it until it became discipline. You didn't freeze in the fire. You learned to live inside it. You are not numb. You are divine restraint. You are not heartless. You are precisely focused. You are not stone anymore. You are structure incarnate. And now, everything that once felt impossible bows before your endurance. Opportunities come quietly, drawn to your gravity. Enemies fall apart, trying to provoke what won't react. The world starts orbiting the energy you've become. That's when you realize you're not chasing destiny anymore. You are destiny, because what's left after pain, after silence, after death of emotion, is clarity. A clarity so sharp, it cuts through illusion, ego, and fear. You've transcended the need to prove, to justify, to explain. You simply exist, and that existence carries weight, because presence born from suffering is heavier than power born from comfort. Every time you walk into a room, the air shifts, not because you demand it, but because your energy speaks before your mouth does. You no longer seek the throne, you've become it. The stone that once stood now moves with purpose. The monument that was once a memory now walks as a god among the noise, because you've turned existence into endurance, and endurance into elegance. People who once mocked your pain now mimic your strength. They quote the same silence they once called weakness. They wear the armor you forged in solitude, but they'll never understand the fire that molded it, because there's no shortcut to becoming unbreakable. You have to live through collapse. You have to lose everything. You have to be turned to stone by life, and then teach yourself how to move again. And when you do, you move differently. You breathe slower. You speak less. You look at the world with a calm that only the gods recognize, because you've stepped beyond reaction, beyond emotion, beyond the human noise. You've become something ancient, something unshakable, something that doesn't chase, it draws, doesn't fight, it outlasts. That's true domination. Not the roar, not the rage, not the crown, but the silence of a king who no longer needs to prove he's a king. The statue moved, not because it wanted revenge, but because creation itself demanded motion. The pain that once buried you now moves through you, and everything you touch turns to lesson, to legacy, to law. The same world that mocked you now builds temples to your resilience. The same voices that doubted you now speak your name with awe, because that's what happens when you stop begging for redemption and start embodying it. You have become your own legend, the living monument of what happens when hurt doesn't break. It builds. They thought turning you to stone would stop you, but it only gave you eternity, because stone doesn't die. It endures storms, centuries, time itself. And now, you are time, unfolding, unforgiving, unmoved. They thought I turned to stone. They never realized I was teaching the mountain how to move. There's a strange peace that comes when you realize you've become part of something timeless. The pain is gone. The noise is gone. All that's left is silence carved in stone, still, heavy, eternal. You don't wake up fighting your demons anymore. You wake up beside them. They bow now, because even your shadows know who commands them. You've reached the stage where wounds don't reopen. They speak. Every scar has a memory. Every memory has a lesson, and every lesson becomes another line in your scripture. You're no longer just a man trying to heal. You're a monument to everything that tried to destroy you and failed. You are proof that heartbreak can become holy, that pain can become prophecy, that silence can echo louder than screams. They look at you and see calm, but inside that calm lives every storm you've survived. They see stillness, but beneath that stillness lies a kingdom of thunder, because you didn't just rebuild, you transcended rebuilding. You became something beyond damage, beyond emotion, beyond recognition. You don't cry anymore, not because you've forgotten how, but because monuments don't cry. They just stand, and standing, for you, is sacred. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every fall was chiseling away the excess, carving you into focus, sharpening your silence into sculpture. You were once flesh, now you are form. You were once broken, now you are definition. And that's the paradox of power. It's not about noise or dominance or vengeance. It's about endurance, about stillness, about existing when no one expected you to. The ones who left can't look you in the eye anymore, because your peace exposes their chaos. Your strength amplifies their weakness. Your silence reminds them of the noise they still carry, and they'll never admit it. But they wish they'd never hurt you, because they see now the pain they caused became your power. Their betrayal became your blessing. Their absence became your throne. You no longer wish them harm. You wish them clarity, because only when they see what they've lost will they understand what they were never worthy to hold. But by then, it won't matter, because you've already outgrown them. You've already transcended the human hunger for validation. You no longer seek closure. You are closure. This is what they don't tell you about becoming strong. You lose the ability to return to softness. You stop belonging to the world that once fed you, because once you've been reborn in darkness, light becomes too loud. You see through everything now, the fake smiles, the hollow promises, the temporary love, and you don't resent it anymore. You simply observe, because gods don't argue with ghosts. You've learned to carry your own name like a crown, not for others to see, but for yourself to remember that you are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after it. The crown doesn't shimmer, it doesn't shine, it bleeds, it cracks. It bears the marks of every storm you survived, but that's what makes it real. This piece you wear now, it's not soft, it's carved, it's earned, it's permanent. And when you look around at the world still chasing noise, you realize how few ever reach this place. The place where nothing can move you anymore. You don't chase wealth. You don't chase revenge. You don't chase validation. You chase nothing, because the mountain doesn't chase clouds. It lets them come and go. And still, it stands. That's what you are now. Stillness mistaken for pride. Peace mistaken for arrogance. Silence mistaken for mystery. But those who've lived your story, they know. They recognize the eyes that have seen too much, the soul that's burned too long, the calm that can only come from collapse. You've become the myth they whisper about, the proof that endurance is divine, that pain doesn't end you, it eternalizes you. And one day, when your name is spoken in rooms you've never walked into, they'll say, He was different. He moved like stone. They'll never understand what it took to become that way, and they don't need to, because monuments aren't built to explain. They're built to endure. Legendary closing line for this section. They wrote my pain into history, but they'll never understand my silence, because monuments don't cry. They endure eternity.